Hey guys, this is Catwarfer's cousin, Dogchucker. Catwarfer couldn't make it today for reasons I'll explain in a bit, but while he's away, I'm gonna help him earn some golden eagles for free. Now, big disclaimer, please do not actually use this way to grind golden eagles. It's not worth your time or your effort. Personally, I thought it would be interesting to try just for the sake of trying, as well as capture the experience of a fresh start in War Thunder. I'm talking about friend invites. The specific conditions are: for each friend who buys a rank 4 vehicle, you, the Pyramid Scheme organizer, gets 100 golden eagles. And for every friend who buys a rank 7 vehicle, you get 2,500 golden eagles. There is also a secret bonus reward where if you indoctrinate 10 of your friends into buying a rank 3 vehicle, you get an extra crew slot for every nation. Now, it's very clearly against the terms of use to create multiple accounts for one person, so that's why I'm here. I'm not Catwarfer, I'm his cousin. I'm going to see how long it takes to start fresh on a new account and get to rank 4, then share my thoughts on the experience. Here we go, new account. I begin with China, thinking that they have less planes to grind since they have fewer vehicles in their tree. This is kind of a mistake, but we'll get to that later. I get to do the tutorial that they haven't updated in 12 years with this crisp 480p video, then they chuck me into my first match against bots. Then I'd like to get into some air RB now for the better research modifiers, so I do another tutorial for takeoff and landing, then into my first real battle. What's funny is that after the match is over, they artificially nerf the rewards to give you a taste of how terrible the grind becomes at higher BRs. Next game, I get screwed over by dumb collision boxes. Also, they nerf the rewards again to show how researching vehicles is just as painful. It's after I get this far that I remember that new accounts can actually use sponsor links to get a bunch of bonuses, most importantly the 1 week of premium time. I've already played a few battles, but it gave me the full rewards, so I'm not sure how long it counts you as a new player, but it worked, so that was nice. They also gave me a few new vehicles to choose from, all of which were American, which actually explains a lot about how US teams operate. Here, the P40 was my go-to, since the BR of 2.7 meant that I wouldn't have to wait 10 years to get into an RB match. The F3F has similar RP and SL modifiers even though it's premium, so it's not much more beneficial to play it over the P40. In-game, this thing is a solid C-tier plane where its only advantage is an okay top speed and that it doesn't compress that much. And it didn't help that Gaijin kept nerfing the modification RP, but I did okay in it. The game also decided it was a good time for my first dead hamster match, which I was only too eager to get out of. The P40 might have been fine if I could actually spade it in a reasonable amount of time, but with the nerfed rewards it wasn't cutting it for me at all, so I switched over to the F4F, and it was surprisingly pleasant. Thankfully the mod research nerfs didn't apply, so I could safely ditch the P40. And from here it's just the standard tech tree grind experience. I chose to go down the naval and attacker lines because you can actually get to top tier with just these two lines if you grind out some of the foldered vehicles. Plus it has a lot of decent vehicles to choose from, as long as you know which ones to skip. Overall, this took me 8 in-game hours and 52 battles to buy my first rank 4 vehicle. That's 12.5 GE per hour, which is laughably small considering with a minimum wage job you can earn at least 80 times more with 1000 GE per hour. I was a little wasteful with Silver Lions because they gave me a bunch at the start for completing basic challenges, which meant I got careless by putting expert crews on vehicles that really didn't need it. This was probably the biggest time loss for me since I had to grind extra SL to purchase the last rank 3 vehicle to progress to rank 4, then I had to grind out even more extra SL to purchase the first rank 4 vehicle and complete the challenge. If I had rationed the SL properly, I probably could have shaved off an hour or two from the total time. At one point I was even rationing SL by not buying modifications on vehicles that I had already gotten them for. This might have also partially been because the RP grind was actually quite nice and quick, thanks to the premium account. Catwarfer doesn't have any premium time, so it was actually quite surprising to see a plane get fully spaded in one game, as well as seeing vehicle research progress jump so quickly. In the actual matches, I did okay. I'm a decent pilot, not nearly the best of the best, and I have a lot of things to improve on, but Good is usually good enough when you're dealing with the average ARB pilot, especially at mid-tier props. I didn't do quite as well as I thought I would, but still decent enough to get some fairly decent KD ratios. I probably could have done much better, but there were a few factors that kinda compounded into a less than perfect experience. First of all, the American teams, my god, they are some of the least reliable teammates you could ask for. I don't necessarily blame them since they're probably on the newer side and you can play a video game however you want, but it's rough seeing half of your team die for a single attacker. Second, the American flight models. US planes can be good in the right hands, but not that many fit the climbing and sustained dogfighting meta of ARB. Most of them are actually the opposite, speccing almost entirely into high speed and high speed turn. While speed is a nice characteristic to have, it alone can't win fights in the same way that climb and sustained turn can. At best, it lets you disengage and re-engage while baiting enemies for your teammates that definitely aren't lawn mowing with a full bomb load. And at worst, all you get to do in a game is take a few head-ons where you get only hits, dive, then run away until the match ends. Either from you dying or you giving up and landing and jaying out. If you have a good mix of other nations, or at least 2 other competent US players on your team that manage to stay alive past the initial merge, the games tend to be quite fun, but this doesn't happen that often. Of course, knowing this, Gaijin gave me a bunch of US vs Japan games, which I can confirm is about as fun as it looks. Third, the American guns. The 50 cals are okay at 2.7, but they're really outclassed by guns of other nations once you hit rank 3. I would rather have 2 Shivaks or 2 Hispanos than 650 cals. Maybe it's a skill issue, but even when you set up for a perfect overshoot deflection shot, you're rewarded with a crit at best, and that's just depressing. For this reason, maybe it would have been better to grind out the P-47s or the P-38s, since they have more reasonable amount of firepower that can actually deal good burst damage, but it's too late for that now. And finally, the poor vision. I thought the crew skill that I would have the most trouble with was G-tolerance, but actually the thing I noticed the largest difference in having a good crew with was the spotting range. You can see the dots, but it's not until they're close that you can tell what plane they are and how fast they're going. It makes it hard to strategize on how to deal with an enemy when you find out last second that you do nothing better than them other than top speed. Most of these are just problems that I have when playing American props in general, which I kinda know how to play around already, but it didn't make the experience any less frustrating. Flying certain planes made this less of an issue though. The F2A and the F4F surprised me with how nimble they are. Catwarfer did EM diagrams for different variants of these planes a while ago, so going into it I knew that they kinda turned okay while having a poor climb thanks to the weak engine, but against players at this BR you can pretty consistently get away with just having a decent turn. I like the F4F the most, which you can probably tell by the stats. It felt a lot like an American I-16. The A-36 and SB-2Cs were also pretty good since they have good firepower and a lot of early game presence thanks to their air spawns, meaning you can actually hit the enemies before your team has a chance to dissolve. The F4U-1A is pretty fun since the difference between top speeds between you and the enemy is significant enough at this BR that it lets you extend to disengage and re-engage in a reasonable amount of time. This is kind of expected. It's hard to have a bad time flying a rank 2 plane since most of your enemies won't be that skilled. They were all better than the P-40 though. Rank 3 is where the choices become a bit tougher. Here the F-8F is the obvious pick, but I didn't have quite as much success as I thought I would. I managed to get an ace while fully stocking it because it was a full down tier, but I only got a few of those, and most games were full up tiers to 5-7 where your speed advantage becomes minimal and your firepower becomes basically unusable. I actually had a lot more success in the F4U4 since it sits at a more reasonable matchmaker. The plane itself is okay, it's not meta since it's primarily a fast plane with a poor turn. It's also got some really good low speed thrust and great flaps, so you can get away with some pretty nasty overshoot stall shots, but you only want to do that when you're in a 1v1 with no other enemies to shoot you down while you're stalled out, and you don't get those very often due to the teams. Once in a blue moon, I do get the fabled decent American teammate who was actually helpful, and those were my favorite games. Other times I would get teammates like this guy who decides to hang me dry last second mid 2v2 to go kill ground targets and my brain falls apart. Like, what are you thinking, dude? Come on. Well, that just about sums it up. Obviously this is a terrible way to earn Golden Eagles since you could probably make a lot more just by grinding out and selling event vehicles. And even more on top of that if you just work a job, but I think it was an enlightening experience to try this. That's all for now, I'll see you guys later.